Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Sweden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. On tonight's episode, we're going to revisit the Orioles 2026 draft now that the signing deadline has passed. The Orioles signed 18 of their 20 picks. We're going to talk about that, as well as give a recap of the Florida Complex League season, which wrapped up over the weekend. All of that is on this episode of Orioles on the Verge, which is brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom coffees are delicious, low-sugar, brain and body fuel you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack is a great way to try all IQ Bar products and flavors. You get 9 IQ Bars, 8 IQ Mix sticks, and 4 IQ Joe sticks. All IQ Bar products are clean label certified, entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients. All IQ Bar products are packed with clean, delicious ingredients that keep you physically and mentally fit, like magnesium, lion's mane, and more. With over 20,000 5-star reviews and counting, more people are fueling their busy lifestyles with IQ Bars, brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom coffees. Their Ultimate Sampler Pack includes all 3. IQ Bars become part of my daily routines, whether it's starting my morning with IQ Joe, grabbing an IQ Bar or IQ Mix to refuel or rehydrate after a hard workout. And right now, IQ Bar is offering our special podcast listeners 20% off all IQ Bar products, including the Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64,000. Text MLB to 64,000. That's MLB to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. And on Monday, we saw the draft deadline pass, and the Orioles ultimately agreed to terms with 18 of their 20 picks from this year's draft. Headline, of course, by the first-round pick and the 7th overall pick in this year's draft, outfielder Eric Booth Jr. And going down the list, the Orioles managed to sign all but 2 players, and that was 19th-round outfielder Victor Salazar and 20th-round right-handed pitcher Ross Davis. One of the players that there were concerns that the Orioles might not be able to sign was right-handed pitcher Gunnar Garrison out of Eaton High School in Colorado. It was thought that Garrison may follow through on his commitment to Arizona State University. In the end, though, the Orioles able to get him with a $252,000 500 signing bonus. And then you look up and down the list, the Orioles go over slot with a handful of players, go under slot with others, and what that led to was them actually tapping into their 5% overage. So the original bonus pool of $13,114,000 became $13,769,700 with the 5% overage, and the Orioles spent all but $5,000 from that total. So all in all, a pretty successful haul for the Orioles here. Now, of course, we have to see how these players pan out on the field. But, Nick, I'll start with you here. I think that if you had said after this day 2 of the draft, the Orioles will sign maybe 16 or 17 of these picks, we would have probably thought that that was fair and could be chalked up as a reasonable success. Yet they walk away with 18 of 20, including the one pitcher who seemed like he was going to be the hardest to sign. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think to kind of put a temporary bow on this is obviously these guys are going to start making their debuts here in a couple of weeks. But, I mean, as we started to learn more about the high school guys in particular, first you see this large group of high school picks, and you're like, all right, it is going to be tough to sign all of these guys. And yes, they signed some older college guys, some senior signs, but are they saving enough across the board? Because you also throw in Ty Head, who was a draft-eligible sophomore in the second round there. So it's going to be tough. But Eric Booth, you save a little bit with Eric Booth Jr. Yes, you give a little bit more to Ty Head. You gave a little bit more to Ross Norman as well, the 11th rounder out of Coastal Carolina. But it seemed like, I mentioned this in the draft recap, right after the draft, Will Robertson, the man running the show now here for the last 2 years there for the Orioles, Robertson had a quote about the scouts in the organization being deliberate in how they went out and evaluated the high school class. And so that being so deliberate in scouting high schoolers and drafting so many, it's not just high schoolers are going to go away. Let's gobble them all up before we can't take them anymore. I think they clearly went out with a purpose and had good relationships with these guys. And pretty much all these guys, we don't know about the 19th and 20th rounders. I haven't seen like any interviews with them, but for some of the other guys, like Braden Fry came out like hours after the draft and was like, basically like, yo, I'm signing. It seemed very clear that I'm surprised he even got 150K. But he was very clear. I think he was the first player to sign like immediately after the draft. They had good relationships with a lot of these prospects. And then again, I referenced Joe Doyle's podcast, his Overslot draft recap episode, when he talked about the high school picks. He's like, yeah, the Orioles didn't target anybody who's going to demand a lot of money. They should be able to sign most of these guys, but they got really good prospects. I think don't just look at the schools they committed to judge some of these guys. Like Will Plunkett, I think I'm workshopping a really hot take about Will Plunkett that I'm not going to put out there, but I think Will Plunkett could be a fascinating player. He was committed to Binghamton. Now, Binghamton had a really good year up there in whatever conference they're in, American East, whatever, up somewhat, one of those random New England conferences. But I think Will Plunkett is a fascinating player for the Orioles. All these high school picks are. And to get Gunnar Garrison, who I thought was definitely going to be the tough sign, but as Joe said, Joe made it seem like he wasn't going to be a very tough sign and that the Orioles would be able to get him fairly easily, even though he was committed to Arizona State. Guy's 6'5", 230 plus pounds, throwing 95, 96 miles an hour already. Like that's a dude committed to a pretty prominent program that could have made, I think, a lot of money at Arizona State this year. But he signs for, what did he, like 100 something K over? So you had to pay up for him. If it meant sacrificing the 19th and 20th round pick, the 19th round pick, Victor Salazar, I don't know if I saw too much there with him. I struggled to write his draft blurb afterwards. It's like maybe some power. He's got some speed, but like this is at best, I think he has a decent JUCO season and he goes off to some like small mid-major program. Ross Davis, I mentioned last week in the mailbag episode that I was becoming a lot more intrigued by Ross Davis, found some more videos on him. He's got good velo, deep pitch mix. I would have loved to have him. But if it meant signing 1 through 18, I'm down. I love it. You've got this good mix of interesting arms like Miguel Hugas, Adam Mercer. I think there's a lot to dream on there. Braden Smith, we don't know because he only made 8 starts last year before taking the line drive to the head, but he's out there telling local reporters that he's ready to throw for like a minor league team now. Even though he just came back, I don't think we're going to see him this year, obviously, but we'll see what he brings to the table. I thought Ryan Peach screamed Orioles draft pick the first time I watched him back in February. I mentioned Ross Norman. The Orioles gave him overslot because he could have went back to Coastal Carolina, made a bunch of money, and made a lot more money next year. I think this pitching group is fascinating. You got a lot of high school talent that has got a tremendous ceiling. I think since we started the show in 2020, it's not my favorite draft class, but I think it's undoubtedly has the highest ceiling of the draft classes since we started doing the show. So yeah, you didn't sign 19 and 20th round. I'm okay with that because you got some high school studs in this class.
That would be a good podcast, ranking the draft classes.
Since you might need a lot of content ideas during the lockout.
Yeah, since Elias took over. It's hard to beat 2019, but I love this draft coming out of it, especially considering the position the Orioles were in where they didn't have the money and the spending power, draft pick power to really do what they did in 2025, another draft that I loved and would probably be way up there. But for the bang for their buck, I thought they killed it. And 1 through 18 were the priority. They got it done. Yeah, 19 and 20. I feel like 20, I don't know why I'm just going off of round numbers. I think the last pick was like a backup to Gunnar Garrison, who, what a coup to get him for the price they did. I think that is a very interesting arm right there. That's like very high upside in the 18th round and got him for not even that much of a slot. I was very surprised by that. But getting all these guys signed, you got the ceilings of Eric Booth Jr., Roberts, Ty Head, like that's some serious upside. And that's not even going into Ryan Peach, Zane Adams, like a lot of like guys that you're going to see at least some of them pop in a way that we saw with Caden Hunter, Joseph Jirwa, specifically on the pitching side. And like you said, that high school talent, I feel like the Orioles are kind of found something there between Nate George and Jaden Loray in back-to-back years, DJ Layton, Braylon Whitaker, Andrew Test. Like all these guys, they have a great track record with high school guys. And if they focused on that and then they took these guys like Will Plunkett and all the rest, like that's exciting. So I'm glad they got him signed. Thought it was a really, really solid draft class. And Will Robertson, stay tuned to this RSS feed later in the week. Maybe you'll hear some more.
Yeah, I was really happy with the way that this turned out. Like I said, there was a possibility coming out of the draft that I thought maybe they could walk away with 17 and 20. And the only way they get Gunnar Garrison is if one of the high schoolers in the first 10 rounds, in particular Roberts or Plunkett, doesn't sign, then that's when you get Gunnar Garrison. But they managed to get all three of those guys, and I think that there's a lot, not just in the high school guys, but the college arms. Peets and Adams, I think, both fit this system really well. I've said after our full draft recap that Adams might have been my favorite pick in the middle of the first 10 rounds, and I still stand by that one. And then with Dominic Vagley, I know there was some murmurs after the pick, like, why are you taking a guy with an ERA that high? Well, when you look at it, there's just a really good pitch mix there, and if you can work with the fastball a little bit, you might have something. There's a lot of parallels between him and JT Quinn, and you look at what Quinn has done this year in Frederick, I think Vagley could be in that spot this time next year.
Yeah, and I will admit, I admit in the first post-draft episode we did, if you go back to the Vagley pick and you see who else was on the board, if I'm making the decision and I'm just some uninformed whoever that talks into a microphone, if I'm making that pick, he might be fifth or sixth choice for me at that point, looking at who else was available at the time, to be completely honest. But like, he's here in the system. He's an Oriole. I'm going to cheer for him, and I'm going to follow his development very closely, and I hope he pans out. And when you see what the Orioles have done with guys like you guys had mentioned earlier, Caden Hunter, 6th-round pick, and now it's not just us. Like, you look at a lot of other outlets have him as a top 10 prospect in the system. Other outlets are passing us on the Caden Hunter love and where they have him ranked in the system. When you see the rise that Joseph Giro's had, and he's maybe cooled off a little bit lately, maybe getting a little tired. He's done a lot with the futures game and everything as well. But when you see the rise of some of these guys, Sebastian Gongor, you see the rise he's taken this year. I think the Orioles deserve a lot of credit for their pitching development, obviously. But I'm willing to say, hey, I'm going to give Dominic Vagley the next year, the next 2 years, and see what he can turn into. So I'm not going to second guess that pick right now. See what he looks like once he gets on a pro mound. But yeah, just the upside here is tremendous. And I like that. Getting the max bang for your buck when you had, what was it, the 13th or 17th? I mean, their bonus pool was pretty low, and they worked it pretty well. They hit that overage. They spent almost literally every penny that they possibly could. They got 18 new guys into the organization, plus 5 pitchers on the UDFA market. Excited. I think Ty had already said, hey, I'm August 10th, I think is the date he spit out for, I'll be in Delmarva August 10th. So we're going to see these guys in a couple of weeks after they complete their orientation down in Sarasota and ramp back up. Some of these guys pitched in, the draft league or the Appalachian League, or I don't know if any of these guys, the Orioles drafted, were on the Cape, but some of these guys were playing summer ball, but some of them, their season's been over for a while now. They're getting back into game shape, and we're going to see some of them in a couple of weeks here. And I'm pumped. Excited to talk about them again in a couple of weeks.
Without a doubt, and we'll be following them closely once they start playing the system. And as Nick mentioned, probably going to see some of these guys in Delmarva in a few weeks. We'll go over now to the 2026 FCL Orioles, who put together a pretty successful season, 34-23, good enough to make the playoffs. They were knocked out by the eventual league champion Astros, but along the way, several prospects stood out. We talked about 2 guys on our episode earlier this week who were just promoted to Delmarva. That's Hector Campusano and Damone Newell on the hitting side. Early on in the year, the team was helped out by players like Jaden Loray and Elvin Garcia, both of whom would earn pretty quick promotions to Delmarva. And at the beginning of the year, we made the point that when you looked at the position player group, top to bottom, in the FCL, you could be pretty optimistic about what you were going to have. But there were a lot more question marks on the pitching side of things. And it's important to keep in mind that the Orioles had this success in the FCL despite a lot of challenges early in the season to their pitching depth. And if you looked at their 5.22 team ERA, you would think, well, that wasn't very good, except that the league average in the FCL this year was 5.76. It was not a good year for pitching in the Florida complex. Like, it's important to get that out of the way right now. But overall, solid year, good team effort in the FCL, and a lot of prospects jumped out at us, and that's a little bit of what we'll talk about here. And Bob, I'll start with you. Just what were your thoughts on this group as a whole as you were following them over the course of the season?
What a weird season for the FCL, and potentially the last, or maybe not. But if they're going to start getting rid of more minor league teams, which I'm not for at all, I think the FCL is in danger. They could probably just make it a complex thing. Don't publicize it. Anyway, it was a very injury-riddled year. Like, Jose Pena was on the roster, never played a game. The outfielder who had Lysandro Sanchez, I think is who I'm thinking of, had a breakout season in 2025 in the DSL. He played in like 5 games, and that's it. Like, he was hurt all year, pitching hurt. I feel like the season came down to like 4 or 5 guys establishing themselves as breakout position player prospects. You have Francisco Morale, and then you had a bunch of guys. What it came down to for me was, Pat Riley's coming back. He just showed up in the FCL. KK Clark, he just showed up. Holden DeYoung, he just showed up. Like, it was like the rehab central of this year. So injuries in both fronts, going down and coming back. I feel like that's what it was all about. And I'll remember it for Jaden Loray, Jamon Noel, and Hector Camposano, mostly just banging the door down with the bat, trying to make the way to Delmarva. Obviously, Jaden Loray got there first, but this week we're going to see what the other guys can do.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys I think we can go into a little bit more detail about. I've got 2 pitchers that I think I would highlight as intriguing guys. Yeah, a lot of the big production went up to Delmarva fairly early on in the year, but I think there are 2 pitchers I'd look at. Unfortunately, some of the guys that I was excited about, that we also have access to limited StatCast data this year, which was good. No video. Some of these guys we've never watched live before, so it's hard to just go strictly off the data. But at least with some limited StatCast data, at least for me, the way I look at it is I'm able to see, are there any data points that say I'm circling this name for when they do get called up to Delmarva, and are they going to be worth paying attention to? Or you got a lot of guys who, like Esteban Luna was somebody that I've been excited about for 2 years. Could he take that next step forward? And this year he didn't strike out a lot of guys. He walked a lot of guys. And I think his entire arsenal graded out as like a 93 stuff plus. Like, it was a disappointing year for that. Kevin Velasco sat 91 with really nothing metrically sexy about the profile. And these are guys who have been 4 or 5 years in the system that we were, could they take a jump this year? They didn't. Raymond Sosa, I think, was a DSL All-Star. He's listed at 6'4" and 20 years old. And you're like, all right, this guy, all right, maybe a little bit intriguing. But he walked everybody plus the ball boys down there in the FCL. Just a bad year. On the hitting side, yeah, I think we've got like 3 guys I'd really like to talk about in detail. But yeah, you mentioned Jose Pena, 16 years old last year in the DSL, league average bat. But you look at what he did as a 16-year-old, you kind of felt good about him once we got confirmation that he was going to start as a 17-year-old in stateside. Like, all right, that tells you a lot that the Orioles are satisfied with what he did in the Dominican Summer League last year. He doesn't play a single game, like you mentioned. Emilio Sanchez, he was a $1.3, $1.4 million shortstop the Orioles signed back in 2024. He's still a young guy, but I don't know. It's 41 games this year. He hit .099. He did have a 143 batting average on balls in play, but he's played 3 years now, and he's got a 190 average with no home runs. So it's like, is Emilio Sanchez kind of done? Joe Philip Guzman walks a ton, but so does everybody in the FCL. Like, yeah, we don't have too many names I think we can really dive into and highlight on this FCL recap episode, which is surprising considering that they made the playoffs, and had a really good record. But again, yeah, it's a lot of the rehabbing guys. It was the Jane Lorays of the world that they shined quickly and then were immediately shipped up to Delmarva. But I think you've got a couple of names of intrigue that are worth paying attention to next year when they get up to Delmarva.
It was tough with Sanchez this year because I've always been a believer in the glove, and I was hoping we'd see a little bit more out of the bat, but that wasn't the case. I do want to go back to you, Nick, though, just to kind of start the conversation on offense. Who stood out to you?
Offensively, it was... Well, first, I'll talk about Wilfred De La Cruz for a little bit. Statistically, not the season any of us expected, but still just 18 years old. And now he's got a full FCL season under his belt already. He still walked a lot and didn't show a ton of swing and miss, but the raw power numbers in the limited data that we do have access to were kind of below average, unfortunately. He had his moments, but really no sustained success, especially after all the hype last year coming over from the Cubs, signing for more than $2 million. But I'm not writing him off at all, and he might dip in our rankings, I think, probably as the season wraps up, but he didn't take the step forward I think we were all hoping for. The Cam Lee, I'm interested to hear y'all's thoughts on Cam Lee. I'm not writing him off. He's 20 years old and was just drafted in the 9th round out of the JUCO ranks, and it's one FCL season. But I entered the year with no idea who this guy was, as a prospect, and I still have a lot of questions, though. 20 walks to 10 strikeouts is good. He had 30 stolen bases in 32 attempts. That's very good, but it's also against FCL catching, but still a good number. 88% contact rate, 5.5% swinging strike rate, both very good. 99 WRC plus was a league average bat, but in the very, very limited StatCast data we got, there's just no impact on the baseball. His max EV was 96 miles per hour. 16th percentile, 90 EV. So he made a lot of contact. It just wasn't good contact, and it was typically on the ground, 62% of the time. So I'm fully keeping my mind open about a potential Cam Lee breakout in 2027, but I still have a lot of questions there. For me, it's Hector Camposano and Jamon Nuella were the two guys that stood out, and I wrote about them a little bit on Monday morning's piece. Camposano, he's up in Delmarva now. Camposano has good raw power numbers, above average raw power numbers, but they didn't show up as home runs. So I'm interested to see the quality of contact when he gets to Delmarva. Jamon Nuella was just across the board. I mean, maybe he doesn't have eye-popping raw power, but the strikeout rate has gone from 30% to 20% to 16% this year. The walk rate continues to climb, 19% to 22% to 23%. OPS up 50 points, 100 points year over year. Good contact, not a lot of swing and miss. That's the star right there was Jamon Nuella, the guys who stayed all year. 94 stolen bases in 3 seasons. I'm pumped that we get to see Jamon Nuella for these last 4 or 5 weeks of the regular season up in Delmarva.
Yeah, offensively, I think you nailed it with Noel and Camposano. It seems like Camposano, he hits the ball really hard for his age and stuff, but he had no home runs. So probably needs to start lifting the ball more, but very curious to see him in Delmarva. Noel, to me, is real Aaron Estrada, Frederick Bencosme, that big riser, just year to year, just getting so much better and better. 2024 goes from 19% walk rate, 30% strikeout rate to last year, repeating DSL 21, almost 22% walk rate, 20.5% strikeout rate. And then this year, 19 years old, switch hitting middle infielder, 23% walk rate, 16.8% strikeout rate, 200 ISO. That's pretty good for this 19-year-old switch hitting infielder, and 29 steals, almost 30 steals. He 12 doubles, 4 triples, 3 home runs. He's had 3 home runs in each year, but clearly making better and better contact. He just seems like he's getting better and better as he goes on, and that's obviously what you want to see. Cam Lee, I completely agree. 7.7% strikeout rate, fantastic. 15.4% walk rate, great, good stuff. A 99 WRC plus at 20 years old, that's not bad. First run, But yeah, that 069 ISO, the not hitting the ball with authority. He's a smaller guy, so let's get him in the weight room this offseason. Let's get those way to bat program going and see if he can just impact the ball a little bit more. I'd love to know what his defense is like, so maybe that could add value as well. And then it's easy to forget, like already mentioned Jaden Loray, but Elvin Garcia started in the FCL, performed really well before getting promoted to Loe Delmarva. Adriander Mejia, it's a very similar thing. 19-year-old catching / first base prospect. He started the year on the IL, Delmarva IL, then went to FCL as a rehab, eventually was just put there on their roster, had a 107 WRC plus, didn't walk much, but didn't really strike out much, hit for a little bit of power, and now he's up in Loe Delmarva as well. Just shout out some guys that made it up there a couple weeks ago and maybe deserve a little shout out for their time in the FCL. And Junior Abar, last thing. I feel like Junior Abar caught my eye early in the year for Delmarva, but then he kind of sucked. But I saw like the frame, I could see something there. He gets sent down to FCL and performed really well. Really had a, what is it? Let's see real quick. 850 OPS and really improved the walk and strikeout rate. And then he went back to Delmarva recently, and I feel like he's carried that over. So I'm keeping my eye on Junior Abar coming into 2027.
Yeah, I'll just very quickly share my thoughts about De La Cruz and before getting into some of the other players in this group. I think that what Nick said is accurate. You know, you look, there are some positives in his stat line, but overall the power didn't come through the way that we had hoped it would. You look at the StatCast data, it wasn't particularly promising, but I could see him being a guy that starts next year back in the FCL, and much like Elvin Garcia this year, if he gets off to a good start, he could be in Delmarva within a few weeks. And if he's in Loe as a 19-year-old, at least holding his own every day, that's a win development-wise. And then Cam Lee, I think you're both right. There's enough here to be intrigued. There's clearly some good all-around athleticism, but he definitely needs to impact the ball more. Now, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, I think that if you were going to kind of compare the seasons of Newell and Camposano side by side and try to figure out who was the best one in that group, it would be a real toss-up. I think both stood out in their own ways. Campusano has more raw power, in my opinion, than Newell does, but Newell right now is doing a little bit better job of getting the most out of his power in games, and you both hit the nail on the head. The year-over-year progression that he has shown has been nothing short of impressive. You go back to his first year in the DSL in 2024, I remember following him and thinking, okay, there's something here. Switch hitter, good athlete, needs to cut back from the strikeouts, but the Orioles may have something here. Cuts back on the strikeouts in a big way. His second trip through the DSL, gets pushed up to the FCL this year. I think had a great season. Now he's going to go to Delmarva, and I feel like if he performs well there over these next 4 or 5 weeks, he's solid. He's always kind of been back end of the top 50 for us. I feel like he's going to move up quite a bit if he's able to go to Delmarva and sustain the success. Maybe, I don't think it's going to be top 30 level, but I could definitely see top 40.
He has one of the traits that I find, limited sample size, obviously, but especially for these international kids that are coming in and learning, not comparing him to Samuel Basayo, but Basayo was a guy that got better as the year went on. Like, you could just see the improvement during the season, like a snowball going downhill. And I feel like Jamon Newell, very similar in the sense that the longer he's in a league, like, he's improving on the fly. Like, his first season in the DSL, I remember following the box scores daily, and he got off to a terrible start. And then the walk started coming, and then the hits started coming. And then I don't know. There's something there. I'm keeping my eye on. Clearly need to see him in action live on Delmarva's wonderful feed. But yeah, definitely a huge up air for him. And I just realized I went on that whole tirade and didn't even mention Wilfred De La Cruz, who I think my opinion hasn't changed much, just because I think what I've understood from his scouting report is like he has this swing that will provide that power once he actually grows into it. So right now, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't shock me that at least he's hitting the ball in the air. And as he gets a little bit stronger, as he ages a little bit, those balls will start finding gaps, getting over the wall. So not really too discouraged. I think the walk and strikeout numbers are good. He didn't break out, but I'm not concerned.
Yeah, I could honestly see Wilfred De La Cruz just having a good offseason. And the FCL season is technically over, but like they're still playing games down there for the next couple of weeks, months, even. Like the business continues as usual down there. They're still scrimmaging other teams. It's just not official box scores anymore. They're doing inter squads. They're doing camps. They got all the draft picks and UDFAs down there right now. So there's still daily action down there happening in Sarasota where these guys are learning and still developing. I wouldn't be shocked if Wilfred De La Cruz has a good fall and comes back after the offseason, has a good spring, and starts next year in Delmarva. Yeah, look at what Braylon Whitaker and DJ Layton did last year in the FCL, and they got bumped up to Delmarva, and look at the years they've had. So, yeah, I can see Wilfred De La Cruz as a guy who potentially starts the year in Delmarva, and then it's like, all right, Cam Lee, does he have a bounce back? Jose Pena, what was that injury? Does he have a bounce back? And then like the two biggest disappointments, Lisandro Sanchez and Starlin Mieses, both guys, like Sanchez got good money in last year's draft class. Mieses signed later, but they both had really good DSL seasons. And then Mieses, 70 at-bats in 34 games, so not even a starter. He was a bench bat, hit 114, and like you mentioned with Sanchez, he only played in a handful of games and was hurt all year. So is there going to be a bounce back between them two, Cam Lee, Jose Pena, who breaks out next year among that group? But yeah, intriguing group. And if we want to move to the pitchers real quick, I just got two names I'll throw out there real quick. Holden DeJong and Connor Gear. Like DeJong, I think he did enough to keep me interested. Like he's a 6'4" lefty, drafted in the 11th round last year. Smaller school guy, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Yes, that is a D1 school. It's a random Northeast area, mid-major D1 program. Somehow schedules JMU a lot. I've seen more NJIT baseball than I care to admit in my lifetime. But smaller school guy had TJ surgery last year, fairly early on in the year. Actually left his start against UMBC early because he suffered the injury, had surgery. Returned this year in the FCL. I want to give him another. The Orioles have had very limited time with him fully healthy, so I want to see what he can do. The fastball sat 93, had good life, racked up the whiffs, changeup produced a 43% whiff rate. Incomplete data sample there, but still, I'm excited to see what DeJong looks like next year after the Orioles have more time with a healthy version of him. And Connor Gear, I think he quietly had a good season. 2 blowups kind of skew the final line a bit. He gave up 7 runs in 2 innings in just his third career outing, and then he gave up 6 runs in 3 innings in his last start in June. But in 12 July innings, he's given up 1 earned run to close out the year. 20th round pick last year, just 20 years old, also a JUCO guy. We knew he was going to be a long-term project, came in as a 2-pitch guy. I think according to StatCast, he showed 5 pitches in the FCL, 2,600 RPM slider and curveball. Fastball has good spin, good life. The velo is not there yet. It's 91, 92, but he's young. There's a lot of room for physical development. So I'm excited to see both of those guys, what they look like in 2027.
Yeah, pitching side, obviously Francisco Morel, the standout. I think he was a big name for a pitcher, international signing. He was a relatively high bonus signing, and he's performed pretty well the last few years. I'm excited to see him in full season ball going into next year. Connor Gear, yeah, I think he's progressed nicely. There's nothing really to say, oh, let's put him into the top 50, but there's nothing to say that he can't develop into that type of arm. Holden DeJong, I feel like it was a 6 ERA, but it's like a 4.33 FIP. Like he struck out 28 batters in 21 innings. The walks were a little high, but he's coming back from Tommy John. That's going to happen. What else? I think Esteban Luna was interesting enough. I think he popped, had some interesting things. KK Clark, I think he's going to get a shot to be a starter. And Javier Gonzalez was really strong out of the bullpen. So, it's not all for naught, but it was a weird year, but there's certainly some sparkling diamonds in the rough there.
I'll give Gear credit because outside the two blowups that Nick mentioned, when I saw that Connor Gear was pitching, like just checking the probable starters at the beginning of the day, it's like, okay, there's at least some stability. I kind of know what I'm getting. There's a steadiness to his game. There's a lot of work to be done still. I think that he's doing a better job, as Nick mentioned, of broadening his arsenal. Now the question is going to be, can you get a little bit more fastball velocity? And I expect that he'll probably start next year in Delmarva as a 21-year-old and hopefully being able to take a big step forward. I agree with everything you guys said on Dae Young. And then with KK Clark, I'm glad that he's getting this promotion to Delmarva because we didn't get to see much of him in the FCL, just 12 and 2/3 innings. Walk numbers weren't great, but everything else was pretty good. So hopefully this is a case where if you lengthen him out a little bit over the final 4 or 5 weeks of the season in Delmarva, he gets some starts, able to go deeper into games, get his walks down a little bit, you'll feel good about where he is going into 2027. And with that, now we will head into our final segment of the night. Last call brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street. Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And if you're planning to check out Checker Spot before or after a game, or maybe just hang out there and watch the game, this Saturday is a great time to do so because they will be teaming up with fellow South Baltimore Brewery District breweries Pickett and Mate for the annual hot dog race. Checker Spot, a two-time winner, will be running as well as Relish. Pickett, last year's rating champion Pickett, will be running as mustard with Mate as ketchup. That will take place in the afternoon, a few hours before the game, in the parking lot outside of Pickett. Be sure to check out South Baltimore Brewery District and Checker Spot's social media for more details on that event. If you can't make it on Saturday, though, or you want to look for another time to go back, you'll have plenty of opportunities to do so because Checker Spot is open 7 days a week. They're also a good place to watch the game with good beer, good food, and plenty of TVs to check out the action. That is Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street in South Baltimore. And now in this final segment, it's a pretty straightforward assignment. We're just going to name our hitter and pitcher of the year for the FCL. And I'm going to start with Nick here because he left his spot on the outline blank. So this is a complete mystery to Bob and I what Nick's going to say.
We're unanimous. I just left it blank. It's Francisco Morale. Yeah, I didn't bring him up in the beginning there when looking at the pitchers, but as Bob mentioned, he kind of popped a little bit. The fastball, like it's a lively offering. It maybe doesn't have a ton of velo, but it's got good IVB. He brings plus extension. He's listed at 6'2". I say only 6'2". It's taller than me, but good extension. I think there's a little bit something there with the fastball. It's can he command it? And as I mentioned in the article on Monday, it's like he walked 4 batters over his last 15 innings. He walked 14 in his first 13 innings of the season. So clearly the control got a lot better. There is something there with the fastball. I want to see the fastball and slider specifically now that he's up in Delmarva, see what he looks like. But yeah, a fun lefty arm and Jamon Newell, I think it's the bump with the little bit of power production that we saw for me. Yeah, we talked about him a lot already. Just a great season in the FCL, and now he's up in Delmarva, and we're all trying to trade him. I'm trying to trade him in my draft proposals earlier in the first episode, but a guy who, like I said, when he's up in Delmarva now, it's just like we watch enough Delmarva over these last few years where it's like you can tell instantly, like, does he fit or does he not? Does he look like a Michel Deson out there where clearly the game was way too fast for him and he was not ready for that level? Or is it a Jordan Sanchez where it's like, yeah, he belongs. He fits well. Where is Jamon Newell going to fit when he takes the field for Delmarva this week? I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, I think, we're unanimous. It's Newell and Morale. But just when it comes to Newell and the position players that are coming from the FCL to Delmarva, and we get our first look at them, clearly the data speaks for itself. Like, these numbers, the exit velos, all this stuff is very important. But for me, I need to put it together with the eye test. I know the eye test is not like, I don't make grand conclusions on the eye test, but if I can like piece it in my mind where this all fits together and where the it comes from, it really does help. So if you're just box score watching, just check out a Delmarva game, see what these guys look like. It could help you clear some things up. So excited to see him, as we've said a million times. He had a fantastic season. I thought it was going to be Hector Camposano being like the main hitter, and he was pretty consistent all season long. But like I said, Noel just kept getting better and better as the season went on. And Morale, just tall lefty. Yeah, he's tall to me. He's a half foot taller than me at 6'2". He might not be Joseph Giroux, but he's pretty tall. 3.15 ERA over 34 and a third innings. It was a 31.7% strikeout rate, 13.7 walk rate. So 18% K to walk rate. That's still pretty good, even with those high walk totals. And like you said, it got better as the year went on. Not sure what his injury was to start the year, but it's going to turn out to get him. He should be able to get to close to 60 innings pitched by the end of the season. So that'll be a nice bump up from the 34 and 2/3 he pitched in 2025. And then, yeah, maybe he starts back in Delmarva in 2027, or maybe he starts in Frederick if he pops enough. So should be fun to watch, but great season by those guys.
Yeah, we're unanimous here. I'll just add that in my case, I did have a little bit of a struggle with Noel versus Camposano, and what separated it from me was Noel's power in game was just a little bit better than Camposano. As you look at Noel's season, 19 extra base hits across the board, including 12 doubles, 4 triples, 3 homers, 134 WRC plus. To do all of that while walking nearly a full 7% more than he was striking out is a really big step, a really productive season in my eyes. So that made him the choice over Camposano, but that one was close. Pitcher of the year, it wasn't much of a contest for me. I did think about Connor Gear a little bit for the consistency, like I mentioned earlier. KK Clark just wasn't there long enough for me to really consider him for this. So it was Morale. Just across the board, a really good year. Encouraging to see the strikeout numbers come up. The walk numbers came up, but only slightly. And when you compare that with strikeouts coming up, I think it was a very positive development for him. And as Nick just talked about, fastball velocity, not exactly elite, but when you look at his extension, you look at the profile of that pitch, it's got some real promise. And let's face it, as a lefty with a good slider, he doesn't have to throw mid to upper 90s to be an interesting prospect. He could live low to mid 90s, but if the pitch has good movement and he has good extension on it, and he pairs it with that slider, that's going to make him intriguing to follow. I want to see how he does at Delmarva. I can tell you right now that he's not going to be on my personal top 50 when we update it here in a couple of weeks, but he's in the conversation, and I don't know that I would have said that before this season.
Yeah, and speaking of mid to upper 90s with nasty sliders, how about Andre Hidalgo finally making his debut? Wow. The video on that was very impressive. It was only one inning, but yeah, I get it now.
Yeah, he was fun. I went back and watched that inning today. Hit 99, a lot of 96s and 97s, some issues locating the fastball. I think he was really amped up there, but he dialed it back, found the strike zone, got a nice pickoff from the catcher over at first base, a nice back pick as well. Disgusting secondaries. Yeah, glad he took them out. Good shot out there to close this one out.
The call, they're happy to see him back on the mound. And when we recap the DSL season in a few weeks, I'm sure that we will be talking about that. And with that, that does it for this week. So be sure, though, to stay tuned to our social medias over the next few days. We're expecting we might have a third episode drop later in the week. And with the trade deadline approaching, there is always the possibility of a bonus episode or two popping up on the heels of breaking news. So you can find us on many social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, Blue Sky, and X. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to go to Patreon.com and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. Have access to monthly updates to our top 50 prospect list, as well as bonus weekly shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, Patreon-exclusive channels within our Discord community, and a whole lot more. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens and Zach Spedden, you've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.